Okay, so we're continuing our weather app. So far we have our HTML set up and we want to go into our JavaScript. Now, again, you should get your own API key and just make it a constant variable at the very top. All right, so now the first thing we need is we need to add a click handler for our button. So, because we didn't do it on the HTML, document get element by ID. Remember, the ID of our button is forecast. Dot add event listener. So what we are doing is we are setting up what do I want to happen when a certain event happens. So when that button is clicked, so the event is click, I want to call a function called getData. Right? Now getData does not exist yet. We are about to write it because we want to test that this works. So function getData. And all I want to do right now, we're going to start using our console to check if things are working, right? So we're going to say get data here, just so I know. All right, so let's see what happens. You have to test every step as you are going along. So I am going to open my console here. So remember, you right-click, I'm in Chrome, and I inspect, and I open up my console. All right, let's make this a little bigger here. So let me run this again. Doesn't matter, I can type anything in here. Click my get forecast, and this is how I know that this button is now connected to the code. Every time I click that button, then that particular function is going to get run. Okay, now that we do that, I can continue. So what do I want to do here? I need the zip code. So I'm going to create a variable. Let zip code equals, this probably could be a constant even, but I'm going to use let document.getElement by ID. Remember, we have an element called zip code. And since it's an input element, I need the value that is typed in there. All right, let's make sure we have that. Console log zip code is. Now, as I add these console logs, you can get rid of this one if you want to. So let's see if this is working. So I save, go over here, type in a zip code, click, and we see that we were able to extract whatever zip code I have in here is actually now stored in this variable called zip code. Right? All right, so now we are going to set up for our API call. So I'm going to make a constant. Usually it's called the endpoint equals. And I'm actually copying this over from my API site. So this is the first part of the URL that I'm going to use. HTTPS, this whole thing, right? And then I need a query string. So the query string is going to be the rest of it. So I'm going to set up my constant query. I'm just going to call it query equals, and my query is going to start with the question mark, because anytime you have parameters, they have question marks. And then we've got the zip equals, and I'm going to add my zip code. Then I need to concatenate we need for our units, units equals imperial, and app ID equals, and we are going to concatenate our API key there, right? So then my entire URL is my endpoint plus my query. Now I'm going to look at this to make sure it looks right before I move on. So let me go to my page, refresh, put in a zip code, get the forecast. So here we have the URL, right? And it looks like it's in the right format. We've got the endpoint up to weather, question mark, zip equals the zip code that I put in. You see that's the same zip code that's here. We've got the units and the app ID key at the end. All right, so far so good. We're checking every step of the way. All right, so now we need to set up our steps to do our Ajax request. And it's very standard. So I'm going to set up a variable. It's not going to change, so we'll use const. XHR equals new XML HTTP request. Pay close attention to where there are capital letters in here. So this is the object that I'm going to use to make the request to the API. I need to set up the response. So when the data comes back, xhr.addEventListener. So when the data comes back, it triggers a load event. And I'm going to call a function that we're going to write in just a minute. Response received handler. You could make this function name shorter, but this is very descriptive. Descriptive function names are very useful. All right. Since the data is coming back as JSON data, I also need to say xhr.responseType equals JSON. You'll have a problem if you have JSON data and you don't put this statement in there. Then I need to open the connection. So xhr.open, it's a GET request, and we send it the URL, and then I need to send the data. So xhr.send. Right? So there are these steps. I need to create this object, set up the response, tell it that it's JSON, open the connection, and send the data. All right, so now we have to write our function that is called when the data comes back. Response received handler. And the first thing that you really just want to do here is check for a status. If this dot status 200 is a successful result, then I want to look at what gets back, console.log, and the response comes back in this dot response. All right, so this is what we want to test. So again, what happens when I click the button? It calls get data. Get data does all this, sends the request. When it comes back, it is going to trigger this. All right, let's see if this works. Put in a zip code. And here, if I open this up, what I'm seeing here is this dot response. So the response comes back as a JSON object, and we're going to have to pull the specific data that we want out of this JSON object to display on the page. And we will complete that in the next video. So again, what we've done is we've done our request, and we need to work on this function in order to display our results.